Hey guys, welcome back to Neuro Life Skills Volume 2. This is our second episode. If you guys didn't catch the first one, we did an amazing episode with Dr. Gilles Lamarche, who's the Vice President here at Life University, and he did it all about purpose. For those of you guys that did catch that episode, you kind of already know where we're going with the Neuro Life Skills part. For those of you that don't, the idea is for us to take some things that are everyday life kind of things, or things that should really be a part of our everyday life, and put a neuro spin on it, or get a little bit of an understanding of the neurology behind that and how it can help our brain health and longevity and all those kind of things. So we have a really awesome presenter here with us today to hang out with us, Dr. Patrick Porter, the developer of BrainTap. We get to nerd out on some really cool stuff here. He's going to talk to us about something that I think, honestly, is probably our most important life skill that we need to develop and train. And I don't think people look at it that way either. Sleep is probably the most important thing for brain health in general. But I don't think we really get the understanding that that's something that we have to work on, and even something that we can train and get better at. I know people that suffer with sleep issues definitely want to know how to train and get better at it. But even if you just minor waking up a little fatigued or waking up a little sluggish, we got some tips and tricks on the way here to help you with those kind of things. So something I wanted to kind of jump right in with on this topic is Dr. Porter and I have been chatting here at Life University all weekend at Life Fall CE, and he said something and presented something in the talk that we did the other day that I really want to jump right in on. It's some research that he's a part of that I think is really cool and groundbreaking for our understanding of sleep and how to change it and get it better and all of that. So, Doc, if you could just kind of jump in with that stuff you shared about the minors and sleep. And
Sure. Yeah, before we do that, I want to just point out one little study that I think will hopefully pique their interest, because we look at professional sports and we think these guys are just born this way. And they did a study with basketball players, and what they did was they said, let's see if we give them one more hour of sleep, what will happen? And you wouldn't think 1 hour, what's the big deal? But these are professional athletes. They improved their free throw shooting by 11%. They improved their floor shooting, which means shooting from the floor, by 23%. And they had metrics on even passing, just the speed of the game. And that's why, if you ever wonder, why do these multimillionaires have to go to sleep at certain times? It's because the owners know that if they get them in bed and sleeping, they're going to get higher levels of productivity. And of course, when you can put the metrics on it, like we have the sleep devices that we wear. And when we went to the coal miners, just so you understand, coal miners, and this is in Western Australia, these are guys that go to work in the dark, they work in the dark, they leave in the dark, they never get to see the light of the sun except for their days off. And these are people that aren't sleeping very well. In fact, we had to get them off alcohol to begin with, because I guess in Australia, that's the breakfast of champions. So, but we did that by showing them neurologically what it was doing to them. And we said, just give us one night, give us one score without drinking for a day. And pretty much every one of them stopped drinking during the study. We said, after the study's over, I think the secret was they didn't have to stop forever. They said, just when the study's over, you can go back. Hopefully they didn't, because they saw the events. But the incredible thing was that we had the miners get up in the morning and do a brain tap session. Half of them had our headset, which some of you have seen. It has lights in the ears and lights in the eyes. And this is to help just rebalance the brain. We'll get a little bit more into that. But really, we take you through a cycle of sleep, but we compress it to 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or 20 minutes. So doesn't replace the sleep we get at night. A lot of people think, well, if I do a few brain tap sessions, I won't need to sleep. And I know that you even mentioned in your talk about Einstein taking cat naps, and a lot of the inventors will do this in their labs, but you still need that deep level 4 sleep to cleanse and detox your brain. But in our study, what was pretty cool was we had them get up in the morning, because sleep starts first thing in the morning. And what we found was the brain is dysregulated. And when we measure the brain, like using something like the WAVI, and we're looking at the frontal lobe and what's going on with alpha activity, if those aren't matched, then usually there could be depression, anxiety, sleep disorders, inflammation, those kind of things. And so we said, first thing in the morning, do your session, 10 minutes, get your brain right. Middle of the day, we did what we called brain breaks instead of coffee breaks. So they could choose to do that, one of their 20-minute breaks. They'd do a brain tap session. And then we had them do the ones at night. And remember, half of them were doing it with the headset, half of them weren't. what we found out was the half that used the headset got to a 70 to 80% sleep score improvement within 3 weeks.
Wow.
And most of them had a noticeable improvement the very next day just from one time using it. But we wanted to measure it across 6 weeks. After 6 weeks, it took about 6 weeks with just using the app alone, but you can only, what we find in that short a time period of 6 weeks, if we can get them to 70, 80% sleep improvement, that's pretty good. In fact, we've not seen any studies that show anything better than 30%.
Yeah,
You know,
that's crazy.
and so we had them we didn't teach them any other sleep hygiene, which we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
We just said, let's see what happens. They had to wear the biostrap when they slept and when they walked around during the day because we wanted to know what their physical activity was. These guys were walking around like the Amish. They were doing between 12 and 15,000 steps every day. The Amish, they say, do 20,000 steps. So we knew that moving and breathing is important, but we didn't teach them anything else. We just want to see what happens. And the incredible thing was that once they learned that skill, we did a washout period of 2 weeks. And during that 2-week washout, they weren't doing anything. They still were improving their sleep.
That's awesome.
So the brain learns, and that's the big thing we think is that this is the age of brain fitness, right? So
Yeah.
we want to get the brain working, and sleep is your superpower incubator. If you don't get that sleep, you don't get your superpowers the next day.
Yeah, I love that you said superpowers. We always kind of use the term sleep as a weapon. You know, I noticed if I get 6 to 8 hours of sleep while I was going through school or doing things, I always performed a lot better than, say, the person that stayed up all night crushing through and kind of studying. I want to touch back on a couple of those points, though, because you said a lot of really cool stuff in there. And one thing, we didn't really start off with the brainwave piece and educating on what brainwaves are. Brainwaves are essentially the frequencies that your cells use to communicate with other cells. On the low end, you've got delta, which is a sleep wave. And then on the high end, you've got beta, which is your like get stuff done wave. And then alpha, as Patrick mentioned, is alpha and theta are kind of your in-between ones. Like alpha's a little higher, it's your watchful waiting, kind of ready to go, but not necessarily doing stuff brainwave. And then theta's your just about before you go to sleep kind of brainwave. So what's really cool about the BrainTap device, and we use it here in the office, either to get people going before a session or most of the time to calm them down and help with what we call neural integration, to help all of the pathways that we just kind of wire in with the therapies that we do. It helps to let the brain relax and make those connections even stronger. And it actually, when you go to sleep, when you go into REM, your cells actually separate. The cerebral spinal fluid washes all of the gunk and inflammation away, and those connections come back even stronger. So if you do something like the BrainTap right after you do what we do, what we found is our connectivity in the brain gets a lot more better. Great language there. It gets a lot better. But what we can do is really get a lot of really like long-term potentiation to set in and get that flat plasticity. The other thing that I wanted to go back and explain a little bit more is a lot of people think sleep happens, 30 minutes before I go to bed. Like, hey, I don't know why I'm not sleeping. I turned the TV off 10 minutes before I went to sleep and I didn't eat anything, or I did this and I did that. But I love that you said sleep starts first thing in the morning when you get up. So if you could go a little deeper on that for us.
If you're not getting good sleep, if you're not getting that deep, at least 2.5, maybe 3 hours level 4 sleep, some devices like this will mix in REM sleep with deep sleep, so you don't know. But if you can measure the difference, we need that deep sleep, and that's when the brain starts regulating. It's basically goes back to its natural rhythms. Life itself puts it out of rhythm, because the limbic brain's trying to save us. It's not trying to hurt us, but it's basically hijacked the system. And so if you wake up in the morning, like with an alarm, for instance, that alarm goes, ee, 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 and your nervous system gets lit up. And we all know people that once they get aggravated, they're not able to regulate.
Yeah.
And so if you're one of those people, don't use the alarm. Use like an alarm that uses light, or use with our phones, you can put even nice music on in the background. The key thing, though, is to know when it's time to get up, it's time to get up. If you think about ancient times, if we were still moving across the Serengeti, we'd be sleeping. We wouldn't want to sleep all day. The earth would warm up. The light would be coming. It would wake us up. We'd get up because we wouldn't want to be laying there as a meal. So we're up and running. So first thing in the morning, if you followed me in the morning, first thing I would do is drink water, because they say our brain can shrink 3/4 of an inch while we sleep. So the brain is dehydrated. And we believe that water with minerals, like doing some kind of sea salt or, full spectrum salt, not table salt, in other words.
Right.
But you feed that first, and then what I like to do is get out, do some exercise. There's 3 different ones we teach people. One is you can do yoga and do some breathing exercises, which we'll maybe get into some breathing here today, just to regulate the nervous system. And then, or you can do Tai Chi or martial arts, something to get the whole body moving, or just get up and dance. I mean, put on some music, just move. Our nervous system, our brain actually only functions when we're moving and breathing. I mean, we're designed to be on our feet, moving, breathing, hunting and gathering. We're not designed to sit at tables, and that's why they say it's the new smoking. Yep. So if you're the type of person that gets up in the morning, and one of the things, I'm not against coffee. Some people have accused me of that in the past. But I don't think you should get up and have coffee right away, because coffee is a diuretic and your body's dehydrated. So I have my coffee around 10 o'clock. That's my real coffee break. I don't need it to stimulate myself. I just like the taste of it. So if you have a cup or 2, that's good. But if you're drinking coffee all day long, like a lot of people do, that's going to dysregulate your brain, because you're stimulating. And our body is like a capacitor, if you want to think about that. So when we wake up in the morning, if you've been sleeping all day and you're crunching your teeth, like some people do, grinding their teeth, you weren't sleeping really. Mm-hmm. You were a lot of activity going on. And some people wake up and they're still tired. I mean, that's a sign that you didn't get the night's sleep that you needed, right? We should be waking up on an upswing. And I also believe you need to get out and ground. We were talking at the conference a little bit about, most people we measure, if you're an electrician, you can measure across circuits, the voltage of a person. We should be at 0 point energy, meaning that we bring in energy, we transmit energy, we don't hold it. But our body works like a capacitor, electronic charge, and at night we're supposed to be discharging it, but if you don't discharge at night and you wake up with that stress and you're clinched up, that's because all the kinetic energy that you have didn't get released. Yeah. And if we have to learn to release that kinetic energy during sleep. But if we don't do that, we need to start in the morning. When you start in the morning regulating the brain, then it's natural for us to lose, most people don't know this, but at 2 o'clock every day around the world, wherever you're at, your temperature is going to drop 2 degrees. It actually increases 2 degrees at 2 in the morning. So that's how our body regulates its thing. So when the light hits it at 2 o'clock, when you're down regulating, because these bodies were designed for the Serengeti, not for Atlanta, Georgia, yeah, or being inside, we're supposed to be taking naps. We're supposed to be right there with the gazelle and the zebra, saying, wow, we made it another day, that lion didn't get us, let's take a nap. But we don't. But we believe that if you do that, in our studies, we show that we can upregulate about 80% of the energy you had in the morning. We did this with the soccer team, pro soccer team in Kansas City Sport. After their workouts, we could show them that they had the lymphatic drainage boots and the brain tap, we could reclaim whatever they were at before the practice started. They could get about 80% of that back afterwards. So the recovery time, and most people don't know what recovery is. They think, I get home from work, I'm going to have a couple beers or a glass of wine. That's probably the worst way to downregulate.
That's the opposite of recovery, right? Yes. That's putting yourself further into that sympathetic state.
So the whole point, what I tell people is sleep is an all-day affair. It's not, you do want to have some sleep hygiene. We might talk about that too before you go to bed. But most people treat their life like our brain is analog. Or digital. Digital. Our brain is more analog. So whatever's going on, we keep building up this intensity of the day, or we reduce that intensity. That's why we all know people that they're busy. They're going like crazy, but as soon as they slow down, boom, they pass out. Yeah. That's because their brain isn't regulating correctly.
Yeah, our brain is supposed to be on a rhythm, right? And that's why I like that you kind of, one of my mom's favorite sayings was dance like nobody's watching. So I love kind of get up and dance around and kind of do something fun and get your body moving in a different way, right? Because when you follow like cortisol rhythms too, yeah, that's the big thing. And insulin kind of goes with cortisol. And when we wake, our cortisol rhythm is the highest, and then it's supposed to gradually come down. And if you don't do that, exercise will actually start to help get that cortisol rhythm regulated and get that up. Cortisol goes up with intense movement or activity. So it helps to really set our neurohormonal as well as neurochemical rhythms by getting up and doing some movement, and then getting your day started right, getting into that beta wave, mm-hmm, and jumping out of a delta wave, right? Because I think you shared earlier too, most people are walking around in delta. Oh yeah. They're walking around half asleep. And if your delta wave if you have too many delta waves, then the chances of us getting into beta, doing things that are good for our brain are even worse or even less. So,
the further we get away from beta, for those that don't understand it, is you're going to have more fuzzy thinking. So it's more creativity, more timelessness. So you can zone out, which is good for certain things. I mean, if you're doing problem solving and creativity, those are good. But if you're trying to drive or do some physical, balance your checkbook, in other words, you don't want to have too much delta because you'll stress out. And we all make better decisions when we're not stressed. So we want to get the stress out. And it seems counterintuitive, but when you have about 45% beta and 30% alpha, that's when you have almost like infinite energy. You know, people that have a lot of energy through the day, usually when you measure their brain as far as percentages, that's what you're going to see.
Yeah, and I really like the way, you describe the brain as this capacitor. One of the ways that we really like to describe that too is this ability of cognitive flexibility, cognitive reserve. So how much can you fill the tank and use it through the day and have a balance? For me personally, and we're really honored to have you on this talk, because again, the brain tap is something that I use for myself. I use it as one of those pieces that, as much as it is stress relief, also I use it sometimes to help sleep. And I think that when we talk about vitals, there's things like heart rate, there's things like blood pressure, there's things like pupil size that we think are things that we just don't really control all the time. So when we talk about autonomics, these are things that we can actually build to have better reserve or flexibility or ability to dampen these escape signs, things that we don't even think about. Things as simple as light, sound, air whooshing in the background from the air conditioner turning on and off. It's just passive things that happen to us all the time, and it's just so easy to lose track of all of that stuff. So to make a conscious or active decision into health as to, okay, well, I'm going to use this time to moderate something as simple as my diet or my stress habits with a meditation, or even using the energy in my body and using it for healthy movement like exercise, getting adjusted. So by taking these active steps, letting it be more of a process that's building as opposed to something that seemingly with screens and all these synthetic fake, lights, sounds that we are so used to having them not be congruent, to actually have something to build into a healthy habit that actually tends to feed into the cycle of getting into deeper sleep and more restful sleep. And I love that you also made the distinction between not necessarily just quantity, but quality of sleep. Some people, they get 9 hours of sleep after a head injury, and then they say, oh, I still feel so exhausted. But the other pieces aren't really in balance with each other. So you can go to sleep and you just don't get the resources or the healing that you need from that restful sleep that you may need.
Yeah, it's important to kind of set yourself up again, like throughout the day, right? We wake up with a good rhythm, and then, you said it a little bit ago here about how we need to it's an active process throughout the day. So are there any things that people can do to continue once they wake up and exercise and move and do the salt water? I love we do minerals in our water in the morning too, to kind of set your system up. Some things that they can do throughout the day to keep their system regulated.
Sure. Well, it's normal to be stressed. One thing, that's part of the thing. We all know somebody says, Fred died of a heart attack. He never got upset. I don't understand it. Well, Fred should have got upset. Because we need that variability. We need to be, when it's time to be upset, it's okay to be upset. What's bad is when you not able to unlock that or get rid of it, when you stay stuck in that state. So during the day, what we recommend is breathing. One of the things, what's common with all negative emotional states is lack of breathing, right? You can't be angry and breathe. You can't be frustrated and breathe. You can't be anxious and breathe. You have to slow down your breathing, and maybe even your physiology shifts, so you're basically not getting the oxygen. So if you just kind of roll your shoulders back, your chin up, and just do some breathing. And what I tell people is during the day, there's going to be things that come at you that you're not. Deepak said it best. He said 97% of what's going to happen tomorrow we know about today, but that 3% we don't know about. That's what Michael Tyson was talking about when he said everybody has a plan until they get hit. So whatever hits you that day, you need to have a mechanism. We call them mechanisms of the mind. You train yourself, just like you train your physical body for physical workouts, you got to train your brain for the mental side of life. And when something negative happens, one of the easy ones we do is called stop. And basically, my dad taught it to me when I was in high school, so I still keep teaching it to people because I was one of those angry kids. And playing sports, you can't lose your anger; you get kicked out, right? So you gotta stay in control. And basically, you visualize a stop sign and you say to yourself, "Stop." And then we learned this from golfers, and when we were working with professional golfers, they don't know the difference between real or imagined. They were one of the first sports that really came out and said, hey, golf's a mind game. And when that golfer would hit it into the weeds, they would stop before they'd even leave. If you watch this on the circuit right now, you'll see they stay there for a minute, and they might even swing the club. They're visualizing that shot going perfectly at least 3 times. Because then the brain says, oh, you did it right 3 times. That one that was wrong, it forgets it.
Yeah.
Once is basically an accident. Twice is a coincidence. 3 times is neural networks. So we're building those neural patterns. So we're doing those things. So in the process, what I said, why don't we do that for our own life? This is what my dad taught me. So when I did something wrong, let's say that I got upset about something, how could I handle that differently? I visualize it, like role play in my mind, just right at that moment. How would I like to do it differently? Now my brain starts to set up a pattern. That pattern starts telling me, hey, you can have disruptions, but you can also you don't need to have disruptions all the time. You can also have time to reevaluate, recenter, refocus. And what happens eventually, you're not putting up the stop sign so much because the brain starts to learn that circuit. The other way is to do some quick breathing. Now, you can do most breathing you can do even with people. I might be, if I'm sitting there and I'm listening to somebody and whether I like it or don't like it or whatever, but if my mind starts to wander, I'll focus on the 4-part breathing, which is you breathe into the mental count of 4, hold it for the mental count of 4, breathe out to the mental count of 4, and then hold it out for 4. It's called box breathing. And it's just a way to regulate your nervous system. So you're training your nervous system. Every time you breathe in, you're basically triggering that sympathetic system. When you breathe out, you're triggering that parasympathetic. And we want to be of that flexibility. And what I tell people is think about those solutions you just thought about while you're doing the breathing. Because then you're going to lock in breathing to a solution instead of when you're frustrated or angry and things like that. So those are a couple things. But just know that it's going to be virtually impossible to remove stress from your life. I mean, it is impossible. What we need to do is build your capacity to handle. I love the prayer that they say, don't pray to God to get rid of all of your trials and tribulations. Pray for the strength to handle them. And this is one of the things you can do to get the strength to handle them. We have the capacity, but not if you don't train.
Right.
I always tell people, could you imagine watching your favorite show on TV and the actors and actresses never practiced or rehearsed? And people get up every morning without rehearsing their day. So that's the key part of it.
Yeah, and we know, there's a ton of research on this, whether it's basketball players shooting free throws or pianists learning how to play the piano. When you visualize something, whether it's a thought or an emotion or a movement, the visualization actually activates the same neural networks in the same order that we would if we were actually doing the activity. So that visualization, I love that, even with how something's going to go or our thoughts or our emotions or how we're going to deal with a stressor is huge. So we know that kind of setting up our brain or doing those visualizations is a great way to activate the networks to make us be able to do them better. That's the practice makes, not perfect, but practice makes better, right? Or allows us to have that control. So, if we do all the right things and we set our brain up by getting up, drinking some water, we kind of manage our stress throughout the day by stopping and smelling the roses, so to speak, right?
Yep.
That's really what the breathing exercise is all about. Then what are some things we can do maybe as we wind down? I know there's a ton of stuff out there like turn off the TV and don't do this and maybe, no sugar before bed, or those are big things.
Yeah, you want to, the few key things is no alcohol within at least 2 hours before sleep. If you start monitoring your sleep, you'll not drink within 4 hours because you got to let it metabolize. But the key thing that I tell people is just start turning off lights. We're so accustomed. 100 years ago, the average person slept 12 hours a day because we didn't have lights like we do today. Well, maybe it'd be 150 years now because what happens is we just turn on lights and our brain thinks it's time to stay awake, and we didn't and really select what you're going to watch at night. If you came to my house at night, you would, before we go to bed, we always watch a couple of different comedies. We need more comedies. I don't know what's happened to them today because they're not producing them. We're like
crime dramas.
Yeah, it's like all these things that we're already fear and have all this frustration during the day. I like laughter because I know what it does for the healing of the body, and it also has you dreaming better. So when you do that, you can also don't have your phone in your room if you can help it. We did a study with some people with the WAVI, which measures the P300,
Yep.
so the evoked potential. So they can't fake that one. But what we were seeing was we put the phone 20 feet away, they couldn't hear it. We put it on silent, but every time it got a ding, the person had a cortical response.
Wow.
So there's some quantum entanglement going on
Yeah.
and it's kind of like when you think of somebody and then they call you on the phone. We don't know how that happens, but it happens all the time, right? I tell my wife, I wish I had $1 every time that happens. You mention somebody's name, boom, they show up on your phone, because there's some kind of entanglement here. So, but the key thing is in your room too, darkness is really good, because we have these chromophores on our skin. That's what when we were sleeping outside or even in a cave, when the light started coming in from the cave, that's what would tell us, hey, it's time to get up,
Yep.
And so if we have lights on, that could, now for 20% of the people, it's really crucial. So 80%, they might fall asleep in front of the TV, it's not a big deal, they're fine, but especially blue-eyed people, so we find that they're the ones that are the most light sensitive. And then I think that when you're at night, when you're going to bed, our brain loves patterns. So if even when you're on vacation, we always say go to sleep at the same time. It doesn't matter if it's 11 or 12. If that's the time you go to sleep, that's fine. You just go to sleep at that time. We really want people to go to sleep between 10 and 2 so they can create the melatonin that they need. That's the biggest time that your body starts producing it. And if you don't start the production, then it's like it just says, okay, we'll do that later. It doesn't do it at that time. So we need to be in bed at least by 2 in the morning. All these night owls and 250 channels on TV. Tuning out broadcast news at night is a must. I always tell people, if you're too happy, just turn on broadcast news and you'll be depressed in no time. Not that you don't want to be informed, but do that earlier in the day so your body can regulate. You got to figure out what do you want. Some people watch the news then go to bed. I'm going to show you somebody who's not sleeping very well.
Yeah.
So what you do before you go to bed. If you're one of those people that feels like one of those days where you're really stressed out, you can do an Epsom salt bath. You can put lavender in it. There's a lot of different remedies online. You can just look those up, and there's a lot of biohackers that have their own little theories about it. What I find is that if I do minerals before I go to bed, there's a chiropractor, his name is Dr. Gerald Joffrey. He wrote a book called Get Off Your Acid. And it's really good product, and we use that. And I can tell the difference too, because that's when you need the minerals,
Yeah, to process through it.
Yeah, process through. So we are so acidic just because of the foods, we can't help it. Our environment's like that, all the stressors and toxins we have. But the more you can clear those out, if you can, it also starts with dinner. If you can sit down and have dinner, not in front of the TV, but you're eating. What we found with digestion, and I mentioned this in the study, in the talk over there, was we did a study in Provo, Utah, where they were doing IV drips for the brain, and this was an addiction center, and they did amino acids, and they could measure through urine analysis how much was being absorbed and how much was passing through. Yeah. And they found when somebody's using their cell phone and doing the treatment, or somebody doing brain tap and doing the treatment, they got 30% more absorption of the nutrient when they were doing brain tap rather than looking at their phone, because the phone's a stressful event. People think it's calming, but at night, so what I tell people at night is at least an hour before bed, you should be silencing your phone. We have a policy at our house that usually gets followed, but anything after 8 o'clock, but when you have people that are all over the world, they don't care if it's 8 o'clock in Eastern time zone. They're gonna.
Yeah, they're gonna process.
So those are some things you can do, and there's a lot of different people that do sleep hygiene. That will. You have to find out what works for you is the main thing. For me, I also use a device. Some people might say it's called Uller. It's a you put it on your bed and you can actually adjust your temperature.
Oh, that's really
And
cool.
so it actually warms up half hour before I wake up. It warms up to room temperature, but at night I sleep at 60 degrees.
Okay.
So, but that's what makes, when I'm at home, that's why the sleep score that I showed you today is unusual, because I don't have all my accoutrements, because at home we basically, our bedroom's set up for getting really good sleep. Your bedroom should be for a few things, and sleep should be one of them at least.
Yeah, calming environment, right?
Yeah.
That's why they say, paint walls blue and do some of those different things too to really kind of calm the brain down as we get to sleep. So that's awesome. That's all really good things. I know when my wife watches this, she's going to laugh at the turning the lights off thing. She's always turning lights off to kind of down regulate the house and make it dark before we go to sleep, because You know, I'm always running around turning them on, so she's running around behind me turning them off, so we start to down-regulate. So, you know, and I think that's important that we get that, right? If we take some messages or some things away from this today is sleep starts when we get up in the morning. And as we start to regulate our stresses, as we kind of run through our system throughout the day, that's how we control those rhythms, right? If you're just worrying about sleep 30 minutes before you go to bed, that's not gonna be a good thing. This is something that we start with in the morning, we can regulate and we can kind of go through. So I think it's important that we have, you know, like you said, our brain loves patterns. And the better we're in patterns or rhythms throughout the day, the better our brain will respond to that. If our rhythms get off, that's when our sleep gets off. So we start our rhythm at the beginning of the day by having our cortisol and all of those things kind of fall in line with that normal rhythm. But the other thing too that I want everyone to take away from this is, he's said it multiple times, it's about training the brain to sleep. This is something that, you know, health is an active process, like Dr. Fetterly said too. We have to be active to be healthy, whether it's movement to drive the brain, or whether it's consciously patterning our sleep, patterning our stress response, having the ability to control those things better. We really need to focus in on that and really hone in that skill. So, you know, patterning all throughout the day, patterning those things, and that's one of the things, that's how, you know, sitting here chatting with you, I could nerd out with you all day on this stuff for one, but part of me too, listening to his voice wants to put me to sleep as well, because I use the brain tap to down-regulate my day as well, and it's like, you know, it's almost triggers me right into that sleep response. So as we kind of wrap here, are there any like last minute little tidbits for people to give them to help with this sleep piece?
Well, I think the main thing is to know that a brain can be improved at any age. There's no age limit where it expires or that you can't change it. We've actually done some really good brain studies with people over 100, and their brain still changes. We're still getting 20-30% improvement in neurological function. So it's really important to do that. And the main thing is know that it's natural to be stressed. Don't get down on yourself. Just figure out a strategy that's going to help you de-stress, because that stress is inhibiting your nervous system function. It's not helping you. Some people feel like they need stress. We get addicted to it, and just recognize what it is. We need stress, but we don't need it all the time. You need to figure out what's going to down-regulate your system. Brain tap's one solution, but you've got to have more than that, because you have to put that on, right?
Yeah.
So you have to have things you can do in your everyday life. Figure out what kind of moving and breathing you're going to start doing, so that when it is time for sleep, your body recognizes it and does it. If you're just sitting all day, your body's not doing much. Then you go to sleep in bed, it goes, this is what we've been doing all day, so the brain just gets active. So we got to break up those patterns.
Yeah, and I love that, kind of finishing with that. Break up the patterns, break up the loops, get out of your head with it, and start to set those rhythms so that we're setting up for a nice calm finish to our day after we've done what we're supposed to do throughout our day. Thank you for being here. It's always an honor. I appreciate having you. It's always fun nerding out with you. Like I said, we could do this all day, but I think we'd lose the attention span of some people after a little while, right? So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Again, the neuro life skill of sleep, I think is probably the most important thing we can do. Use sleep as a weapon. Start to develop your toolbox, so to speak, of how you're going to set those rhythms and set your day up to be able to have a restful night's sleep and a good night's sleep to awake refreshed and ready to attack the next day. So thank you guys. We'll see you in a month.